Okay, we've gotten a thumbs up from the director, so we can begin. Welcome to you all, and we really appreciate you tuning in. I would like to give a warm welcome to Charles Griffin, my honored guest. And Charles has spent the last 2 decades engaging on cybersecurity threats and developing responses. And he's now joined Voya to help plan sponsors benefit from his experience. Charles, my first question to you, what does CISSP stand for?
It stands for Certified Information Security Systems Professional. It's an exam based on the 10 different aspects of cybersecurity administered by ISC Squared organization, which is kind of like the industry Cisco of cybersecurity.
Great, great. That sounds like a qualifying attribute to me. So before we get started, I want to refer all of our participants to a toolbar. It will either be at the top of your screen or below. I believe it's at the top for most of you. And you'll see a Q&A right in the middle, an icon for Q&A. We will be tracking questions and trying to answer them as we go along. So go ahead and just fire your questions in there, and we'll try and answer them as we're proceeding. And now let's begin. So I am going to take you through why we think this has become such an issue, the legal landscape. I think this is what plan sponsors are most concerned about, certainly the ones that we are speaking with day in, day out. And there are 3 essential aspects to this. One, there is a major lawsuit that's working its way through the courts, and I do emphasize working its way. This is called Bartnet. Some other people are calling it Abbott Labs. And essentially, the participant is alleging that the plan fiduciaries failed in their duty to exercise appropriate care in hiring their record keeper. Now, this is basically what they tried to do is just suggest that, well, reputationally, this particular record keeper had a number of cyber issues, and so the plan fiduciaries should have known that. Well, the claim has been dismissed twice. First, on just it being a bit sort of non-specific, and then second round, where people were bringing in specifics from other instances, and the judge said, well, you really can't hold that against the fiduciaries in this case. It does not appear as if you've shown that they did something that was objectively unreasonable in hiring this record keeper. So that's where we sit. It looks like they're going to give them another try. But that's not the only issue. There have been other thefts. As you can see, there's a $400,000 theft in 2015, and now we're hearing reports of yet another theft of plan assets. So the real issue is that people are losing money from plans, and I'm sure that's what concerns plan sponsors most. So what we're finding is that the DOL is responding to this same kind of environment, and what they did is they issued a series of 3 lists that plan sponsors can use to basically develop a plan. In other words, how would you go about trying to be a better plan fiduciary with respect to cybersecurity? So I think that the first thing I'd like to ask Charles is, can you give us your reaction to the list of items that the DOL has published?
Certainly. This list came out with 12 points of particulars that you could ask a plan sponsor about, whether they've got function and focus on these 12 areas within their cybersecurity program itself, for actually conducting and having a good cybersecurity program. Any record keeper that's out there will have met these and exceeded these in most cases across the board. It's good advice, but it certainly isn't as extensive as some of the standards on which good cybersecurity programs are based.
Okay. So in other words, it's a good start, but not necessarily a be-all and end-all. I'm thinking that some plan sponsors, probably when they saw this, or it was shared with them by their advisors or their record keepers, were wondering whether the DOL was actually trying to make them IT experts. Do you think that was the intent?
I think in a way, part of that is true from the point of view, not too many people talk about software development life cycle in daily conversation, but being aware of whether your record keeper, those people in which you're entrusting those applications that are being written, have a program that addresses how that software is developed and deployed securely, is part of that education process that I think this document does a pretty good job of exposing people to the high points of what goes into a good cybersecurity program. Does that make
Okay,
sense?
so yeah, so you don't imagine that they're actually trying to make you an expert, but they're trying to make you
No.
aware that you should be availing yourself of advice from people who do know. So
Yes,
people like you.
absolutely.
Okay, so then the tips here, we do have a tip sheet as well. Basically, this was about hiring. So this is a specific set of instructions, and it actually kind of gives you that list of things that you should be thinking about when you're evaluating service providers. So are service providers receiving a lot of questions about this when their plan sponsors are seeking proposals from them?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, being at my employer, we get a lot of these questions, I want to say on a weekly basis from a variety of different sources of people trying to ascertain what kind of cybersecurity program we particularly have. But those general questions are, some of them are very insightful, and should be asked if you're doing due diligence. Absolutely.
And then I'm just led to believe that this is kind of making some people more concerned about online security than they've ever been. They were already worried about for their own account, but now they're having to kind of represent that they're taking care of everyone else. Are you finding that the industry is developing a set of standards that plan sponsors can objectively evaluate, or at least collect information on and do research about? Are you finding that these standards are starting to be propagated?
I think what's happening is from those people that are starting to ask questions about these particular programs and procedures and policies that are in place, uh, they're pretty much covering the waterfront from the high level that you'll see in the DOL to start introductory questions, all the way to very, very extensive security information gathering tools that have upward of 500 to 1,000 questions that they'll ask record keepers about very granular aspects of their cybersecurity program and policies. Yes.
Okay. And are you finding that maybe plan auditors are starting to ask about this? Is this something that's coming up in plan audits?
You know, it's coming up in plan audits. It's coming up in sales calls where people are in the process of interviewing different record keepers. That this is really top of mind of a lot of folks out there these days. Absolutely.
Okay, so I guess really to get down to basics, what can a plan sponsor start thinking about as their primary vector of threat? Is it really true that the participants are likely to be the place that bad actors are targeting?
Absolutely, and that comes in from the point of view that plan sponsors should be making an effort, because this is really a two-way street or a three-way street between the participant, the sponsor, and the record keeper, to keep that personal information secure and being in control of what is disseminated and what's not, and it goes to the proper people. There are things that participants can do to make sure that they're practicing good cybersecurity from the point of view that, you know, when it comes to passwords, it doesn't have to be that, you know, that you don't want to ever use personally identifiable information, because from our perspective, a lot of that information is out there on the dark web already, and it's guessable. What you want to do is you want to have something like a passphrase. The longer you can make that phrase, and it's easy to remember, like my dog's name is Gunner and he's 9 years old. Now, I don't want to have to type a lot, but the more characters you type into that, the more and more complex it is for the interlopers to ever get into that account. So it's length, not anything else. You don't have to go through the upper lower case and all this type of stuff. You can throw a couple of those characters in there, but it doesn't have to be something that's so cryptic you can't remember it. But that's just basic. And if you have any questions, if you go to that website, Have I Been Pwned, you'll be shocked. You put your personal email in there, it'll tell you all the breaches where your email and password have been compromised. So if you reuse that password anywhere, you can be a victim of what they call credential stuffing, where they take what's available on the dark web and they just throw it at your accounts until something sticks.
Wow. Wow. And I just wanted to take this opportunity right now to let all the participants know that in the appendix, we have a number of tips that we can offer to participants, or that you can offer to your participants, just to kind of bring them up to speed on this. But I keep getting back to, okay, so plan sponsors probably, if they're larger, might have ID departments that could help them with this. And so it's probably pretty easy to figure out, okay, maybe I invite my IT department to my committee meeting and I ask them to make sure that the retirement plan is included. These are in some of our recommendations that you'll see here later on. What kinds of help can we offer to the smaller or mid-sized employer? Where can they go for help?
There's a variety of sources. Not that this is some sort of reading test here for the fine print, but you'll find a lot of good sources in here, specifically directed at small, mid-capitalized businesses that are concerned about cybersecurity. The Small Business Administration has some good sites. The FTC has some good resources as well. And the Cyber Readiness Institute also is another good one there that really is looking at, from the perspective, you don't have a dedicated IT group, but what you should do is have some policies within your organization to start reining this in, start reining the cybersecurity vulnerability down to a manageable size. Let's go to the next slide. And the next one, I think, oh, there we go. One of the first things you can do is think about that firewall that you have at your business is your gateway to the internet, where a lot of horrible things can happen. What I suggest is you spend a little bit more than going down to Staples and buying a Linksys type device, and spend some money on one of these other higher end, like a Palo Alto or a Fortinet or a Sonic Wall. They get security updates on a daily basis. They'll push down signatures of recent malware attack type patterns to those devices to block them. It's like the next level, and really the first in a solid level of protection against small businesses right there.
Okay, so we do have some recent events that we can kind of remind people of. Of course, there was the Colonial Pipeline incident. Have they been able to develop what happened there, or do they have a sense of what happened?
Yeah, actually, they had a VPN account that had been abandoned, that they didn't realize was still there, that they still haven't figured out how they got the username and password to, but that's how they came in. They VPN'd in, and now they're inside their network. And once they got inside the network, they were able to upload all the malware and start encrypting all their hard drives at that point.
Gotcha. Okay, so sometimes it can be something that you were using before, you just forgot to kind of get rid of it, and it's still hanging on there. Huh.
And that's why it's key that if you do buy a firewall, one of the first things you do is you change all the default passwords on that and turn off all the management capabilities from the internet as well.
Got it. Mm-hmm. And then in the Transamerica situation, is this one of those dark web situations? Is that what I recall?
Well, I'll tell you, Transamerica was in the news last week, as a matter of fact. They have not announced exactly what transpired, but folks that have accounts with Transamerica that are in Massachusetts received a letter saying that their PII was most likely exposed, and that they have now qualified for free credit check. So that one still hasn't come out in the news big time yet.
Okay.
And Abbott Labs was a case where the participant's account was compromised, which could have been a credential stuffing attack. And they just were very slow to react. They did not flag the interloper as being malignant to the account. So when the participant realized that they had lost money, they said, well, that happened 9 months ago or a year ago, whatever, and we're not responsible. And that's not a responsible position for a record keeper to have.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So from the standpoint of the plan sponsor who might be using Voya, where you now work, what sort of support can they expect from their record keeper in this case? I mean, are you being called to participate in committee meetings, or what's going on in your life these days, Charles?
I spend half of my life in committee meetings where they're talking about reviewing the plans, and cybersecurity is top of mind. They want to talk about that. They want to know what the record keeper is doing to protect their assets and their participants. And the other half of my life is answering surveys that come into Voya from prospective and current customers that are doing due diligence on Voya before they make a purchasing decision.
Gotcha. Okay. So this kind of leads us into our recommendations, but maybe one more point on this whole record keeper perspective. Are the service agreements addressing cybersecurity now? And how do they address that? Is there some sort of indemnification, or how is Voya actually writing this into their agreement, since it's now top of mind everywhere?
A lot of times there'll be a checkbox asking us for, do we have cybersecurity insurance? At what levels? What does it cover? What does it entail? There are a slew of technical questions as to, what's in your policy as far as limiting access to information, who has access to information, what technologies are deployed in your cybersecurity defensive screening, what the responsibilities are of HR and the hiring practices of the people that you bring into your organization. They're pretty extensive surveys that we're responding to.
Okay. And have we seen record keepers embarking on actual training that might be offered to participants, or is that still down the road?
A lot of record keepers are coming out with web pages that when you go to the website, or there'll be a short video talking about some aspect of keeping their account safe, or why they have the safeguards in place that they do have in place, to reassure customers that they're not asleep at the wheel, and they are looking out for them, and they want them to be educated.
Okay. So I think it's probably a good point in our conversation to kind of get down to some key recommendations that we can make. And you'll note from these that these are recommendations, are not necessarily hard and fast. If you do this, everything will be solved, but it certainly kind of gets you to a better place. And the first one, I would say that pretty clear. You have to either involve your IT, your enterprise IT. So in other words, if you have cybersecurity already built into your organization, make sure that they're invited to a committee meeting and actually made to understand that the retirement plan is part of their responsibility, that they didn't overlook it. And that's really what's happened in these circumstances with me. We get the IT department to come in and we say, okay, we know that you're taking care of payroll. We know you're taking care of all these other things. We sell things, we do services online all the time. But the retirement plan deserves some of your attention as well. Now, for those smaller employers and mid-sized employers, almost certainly have to go to outside support, but it's the same sort of thing. Have them dial into your committee meeting. Take note of this as well. So document your efforts. Item 3 here. But before that, draft a plan with help from the IT folks. And how are we going to sort of raise the level of our concern, raise the level of our demonstrated effort in trying to make sure that this doesn't happen to our participants, and then document these efforts, these discussions and planned action steps. Get those into the meeting minutes, because that actually really shows that you took it seriously, that it does actually qualify as something that's material enough that I would want to make sure that I took note of it, and anything that I said I would do, that I go ahead and do that. And that's the function of meeting minutes from our perspective. And then utilize resources as necessary. Now, we already showed you a whole list of websites. What's nice about that list that you'll find is there's a little explanation under each that kind of gives you a sense of what you'll find when you go there. You don't have to go doing hunting and packing through all this list. And I think we found a really good one here just recently, right, Charles? Which one was that?
That was the New York DFS guidance for small businesses, and it's excellent.
Oh, great! And that just kind of hit our radar here just in the last day or so. So that's hot off the press. That might be number one try for you if you are looking for help. And
Yes.
then you utilize plan counsel for advice and agreement review. Now, in this particular area, we are in what's called the third cycle of plan restatement. And this is, to the whole plan governance side of things. What this means is that the documents that govern our plans accumulate amendments over time. And of course, we had a very busy year last year in 2020 with all of the things going on, Secure Act and CARES Act and all these other things that impacted retirement plans. So all these amendments have accumulated over time. So what they do is in a restatement cycle, they say, okay, we're going to wrap all these amendments into the actual document itself so we can clean up this mess of all these other things that we changed. And that's called a plan restatement. Now we're right in the middle of what's called cycle 3. So we think that we'll probably have an opportunity for plan sponsors to be thinking a bit about new service agreements with their vendors. And so that's what we're suggesting, is that you take a good hard look at what the cybersecurity references are in that service agreement, and then share those with plan counsel, so that in order to satisfy yourself that the agreement is comprehensive. We do have a question. Slide says, you know what? I think we might have a misspelling in our slide, and which is that have I been pwned? So substitute the O for substituting a P for the O, and I have to take credit for that. I went in there and changed the spelling, and that was my fault. So thank you so much for pointing that out. I appreciate that. Just goes to show you that somebody's out there is playing heads up ball for us, Charles.
Excellent.
Okay, so we've reached the end of our sort of actual prepared remarks, although we do have the appendix that we can kind of review a little bit. But are there any questions from the audience? I have a couple here. Nope. Okay, that was just on the misspelling. And then, yeah, one of our participants actually checked with our IT department to check on that spelling. So we know that it's that it's bona fide, that we've got it correct now. Okay, Charles, I thought what I'd do is I'd kind of go into the appendix a little bit, because this does have some interesting stuff in here. Can you take us a little bit through these 9 tips?
Certainly. So when a record keeper asks you to register your account, it's a lot like going to Google or Apple, where when you go in there and you log into your account from whatever device you happen to be on, they're actually grabbing some parameters from your workstation, laptop, iPad, cell phone, whatever you're using, like the type of browser, the version of the browser, the type of operating system, the version of the operating system, and some of the hardware itself. It helps marry up the account with your username and password. It's a leading indicator if somebody comes in from an unregistered device. If you go to Apple or Google and you do that, they're going to hit you up with we're going to have to send you a out of band token to confirm this is really you logging in from this new device. Use strong or unique passwords. Use passphrases. They're easy to remember. They're harder to break. If you can, as a small business, look at running multi-factor for your employees to log into their systems. And that will really control who has access. Somebody gets your username and password, does them no good if you're running multi-factor. Keep personal information current. Close or delete unwanted user accounts, a la that we just heard about what happened with Colonial Pipeline. Never use free Wi-Fi. I mean, it may be convenient and that sort of stuff, but if you've got confidential information on your computer, you should never use public Wi-Fi. You should use your cell phone as a hotspot. and that's a much more secure way of getting to the internet. Phishing attacks, 91% of all attacks that are successful against all businesses and end users come from phishing. Don't click on things that you don't know or don't expect. Just delete them. There's tons of emails for you to read. You don't have to read them all. Use antivirus and keep your apps up to date. Patch Tuesday and have antivirus running on your computer. And knowing how to report ID thefts and incidents, there's actually some links on our go-to site that helps you with that if you don't know who to call. And the more you can get your people to abide by these principles, the safer we'll all be.
Yeah, I think that this is just a great list for all of us to kind of take very seriously. I do want to mention to everyone that we're going to have a follow-up web article in our archive that will be on discussions with an attorney regarding new service agreements, and it will actually have a good deal of time devoted to this issue. So stay tuned for that. We do have other slides here, of course, that are about participants and things that you can do that might help to sort of shore up unfortunately the weak link, which is the participant. And it is important that you keep in mind that what the judge said about unreasonably irresponsible activities. I mean, what they're basically, the test is going to be is they don't want you to necessarily be acting as an IT expert like Charles, but they do want you to demonstrate that you've taken this issue seriously and that you can document that you have done so, and that you have a plan to address any issues that you think you might have, and that you follow through on that plan. Charles, is there anything else that you would like to use as kind of a sum up here as we're seeing if there's going to be any questions?
Yes, when you get a chance to take a look at the links that we've sent out, that the Department of New York, the DFS link from a small, medium-sized business, it has got templates that you can download for cybersecurity policy, for access management, for physical security, and that sort of stuff. You can print that out. You can fill in names and locations and that sort of stuff specific to your organization and start building out your own cybersecurity policy. You don't have to be a big expert to do it or pay a lot of money for these services. It's all there on the internet. You can download it and start. And now you've got something like Scott's saying, that if it does get into a lawsuit type of business, you've done due diligence. You've actually addressed cybersecurity. You're working towards closing that gap as best as you can with the resources you have. And free is a good price. It just takes your time.
That's great. Okay, so one more request for any other Q&A. Are there any other questions from our attendees? Hearing none. Thanks so much for attending. I hope that you found this useful. You will be getting a copy of the slides if you are a registered participant. We urge you to share this with your organization and actually take very seriously some of those steps that Charles was just describing. And we're really glad that Charles was able to join us. Thanks so much, Charles.
Thank you, Scott, very much.
Okay, take care.